you find me at Field Mead, leading to these various bits. And this is Grahame Parkway. This is Colindale that we're in. And where that car's just turned in, that goes into the Grahame Park Estate. Now you may think, why am I doing a video about this? Well, if you've seen my videos, then you'll know that I don't spare on the sort of odd and obscure. So I suppose it's rather selfish. I do videos like this mainly because it's a bit journalistic. I'm just sort of capturing stuff. Not that anything's going to dramatically change around here. But I think it's interesting only from the point of view that this particular area has seen a lot of change over, well, what could be thought of as the last 100 years, but certainly over the last 60 years or so. Because, I mean, basically, that way I'm looking there was originally RAF Hendon and what was originally Hendon Aerodrome. So this point actually marks a little bit of a border point, I think. I've never been quite 100% sure where the border of the airfield was and the RAF land, but I rather think, looking at these buildings here, that it might have been, because these buildings date, looking at them, possibly from the very late 60s, which would make sense because that's when the airfield ceased to be and they turned it all over and it went to developers, and in particular the biggest developer being the Greater London Council and Barnet Council, who then created Grahame Parkway. Where you can see these buildings in front of me, these weren't originally part of the plan because these went up in the 90s, I think. And this was just sports fields. I think, in fact, actually, the Metropolitan Police or the RAF had sports field here. There's footage online somewhere. I mean, I've picked up loads of stuff in the past of footage showing, I think it was like a driving test film or something, because there was a driving test centre nearby, and it shows people driving down this road in the early 1970s, and of course all these trees hadn't grown at that point. It was really quite barren because, as I said, it was originally airfield. But I quite like these houses. They are very much of a certain time period, and some are in better shape than others, but they are very evocative of a late 60s, early 70s. But what the legacy of what they did here was they planted all these trees, which are now maturing quite nicely. So none of these trees are really any older than probably about 1968 or thereabouts. So where we're heading towards is Mill Hill and Bunns Lane. The lovely name of Bunns name, Bunns. It's a nice time to shoot a video. I do like autumn, and for the obvious reasons, because of the trees changing, and because there's so many nice trees here, you really get a nice display. Beautiful, really. We're approaching actually so the junction of Bunns Lane, but also we have Lyndhurst Park. Now that definitely is a break point with where the airfield was, because that was a public park. So I think in essence I am still on what would have been, up until the late 1960s, would have been RAF land. It would have been Air Ministry or Ministry of Defence land. I would have been effectively trespassing at this point. But from what I understand from people who were kids in the late 60s, that was quite a common thing. Kids would just break through the fence, they'd ride the bicycles, do all sorts of things, because the airfield had ceased to be operational as an RAF station, active airfield, in 1957. So there was a period of at least 10 years when nothing was happening. So just over there is the Midland Railway. Well, there's a train going through, just as I say that. So it's the London Midland line that runs from St Pancras, Euston, one of the two, I can never get it right, up to the Midlands and the north of England. And this is the Orion Primary School. This has only been built, I think, within the last 10-15 years, if that. Very, very new. But a lot of this was just open land. These are older trees. So I think we are now into that sort of area just on the periphery of the airfield. But we're certainly approaching the end of it. It was a very large airfield for its time. but it wasn't big enough to ensure that it carried on past 1957 because you couldn't really use it for jet planes. It was originally established in 1910 as an aerodrome. It was London's first aerodrome. The London Aerodrome was his original name before it became Hendon, RAF Hendon. And yeah, so I think I'll just pause for a second so someone's approaching. I don't want to capture them on film. Right, back again. Notice I use the expression film. How quaint. I think that this is the border point. And I'm going to say that because these trees here, which are predominantly oak trees, are old. So I believe that at this point here, literally at this point here where you've got a bit of fence, this was the end of the RAF land. So beyond that point, all that was RAF Hendon. And then we move into, this is Lyndhurst Park. And we're going to come up to, I may just pause before I get up to it rather than waffle on too much and waste my battery, which is quite low now. I've done a whole load of videos today. I came out to do the K garage, which you'll be familiar with. That as the motor showrooms on the A1. Look at these wonderful display of trees just on the turn. Anyway, I'm going to pause and then we'll get to the bit which is quite interesting, hopefully. Now, just picking up at this point, I wasn't going to do this section, but I found this quite interesting. This is part of the paving outside Lyndhurst Park, and I'm looking at this brick paving, and this is very reminiscent of the brick paving you get at Grahame Park, the Grahame Park estate. And so I kind of thinking that this was put in by the contractors at the time in the late 60s. Could be wrong, but it's certainly very much the same. Just there is the railway bridge, and that's Buns Lane. And you go underneath those bridges, and on the left, just after the bridges, is where Roger Tichborne, won't mean anything to you necessarily unless you're in Mill Hill. Roger Tichborne has the Mill Hill music studios. So Roger's run those studios for quite a few years now, to put it mildly. And he's also in a band called The Full Stots. I've known Roger for a number of years now. Big supporter of what I've done with the North West London Time Machine account, and a nice chap all round. So just a little bit of advert there for Roger, not that he needs one. So just where you see this building coming up on the other side of the road, that's Churchill House. So I'm going to get to that in a minute once I cross this road. Right, so as I said, that's Churchill House. Now, that building has been extended, so it's got some rather uncomfortable extensions on the other side, but the bit that's got the grey panelling on, that was the original building, and that used to be a Department of Transport test centre for driving tests. And there are at least 2 films on YouTube which were done in the late 60s, early 70s, which show you that place over there when it was a driving test centre. And it was films done for people who were going to be driving test instructors, or people who were going to pass people, whatever they're called. It was also a tax office at one point. I remember coming out here with my family because my sister had to sort out some tax stuff in the late 80s, and it was here. I think she was living in the area at the time, the early 90s. We're just coming up to Lyndhurst Avenue on the left. Now, I'd like to be able to cross the road here, but the pavement runs short and stops. But basically, just behind Churchill House, there was in fact a railway station. And this was the railway that ran from Edgware. It was the Great Northern Railway, and it ran through to, I'm trying to remember now, it ran up to Alexandra Palace area, sort of that area, and Muswell Hill sort of area. Probably got that slightly wrong. But yeah, it was a line that wasn't very much used, and it went out of business in the 30s for passenger traffic, and then for freight in the late 60s. So yes, beyond there, that wooden fence there, or thereabouts, was in fact a station called Mill Hill, the Hale. in brackets, or just Mill Hill the Hale. As I said, I would try and actually get over there, but the pavement runs short. So let's just cross over this road. Yes, so a bit of a giveaway that there was a railway coming through here is the fact that the road rises up to go over what would have been a bridge, and I think the bridge structure is still there, or is being filled in quite heavily. But yeah, the railway went through that way and onwards up to the North London area. This is another entrance into Lyndhurst Park, I mentioned earlier. Nice park that. It's not huge. That's quite nice. Certainly this time of year with all the leaves. Some very, very mature oak trees. So I look down from here. That's where the track bed was. And you can walk through some of this. It'll actually take you through to Mill Hill East. And I forget the name of the walk. You can find it on maps. Not much to see, admittedly. But I mean, that was filled in underneath here. You could see the actual bridge itself, but it's been filled in. That block of flats over there, although they look like they're from the 1920s, they're only probably about 25, 30 years old. And so that's the railway went through there. Now there's a little bit of history going on here because we're coming up to the car park for Mill Hill Broadway station. And I'm going to cross the road at this point. Right, so yeah, this is the car park for Mill Hill Broadway station, which was rebuilt, I think in the mid-60s, because the M1, which runs right next to the railway, meant the building of the M1 extension through to what eventually ends up at Staples Corner. It facilitated the requirement to knock down the old station buildings, which dated probably from the 1860s, 1870s. And you had a car park because obviously people increasingly needed their cars at that time, so they put this in. However, this is all going to change soon because they're going to build a load of flats on this car park space, and that may be something to do with those yellow cranes in the distance. But yeah, this is all going to change, and another bit of development, which, to be honest with you, I mean, the fact that people need homes, all that, etc., I don't think it's going to be particularly tall, but yeah, it's going to be quite a high density development. Nice bit of concrete wall there, dating from the mid to late 60s. Not an awful lot to say here. I was going to mention, actually, just beyond that wall there was originally the station master's house, which apparently survived until quite late into probably the early 70s, I believe, on its own. Rather sad, really. But yeah, the station master's house. So I'm going to just stop a second. I must admit, I do like a bit of concrete. I do like a bit of textured concrete as well. You see, look, it's sort of a ribbed pattern. Quite nice, that. Quite brutal in its own way, but it dates from a time when that was what they did. Well, we need to put a big retaining wall in. Okay, let's do it in concrete. It's all sort of falling to pieces quite badly there. So I'd imagine that with this new development, they'll probably pull this down and start again. As you can see here, it's falling to pieces quite badly, actually. So yeah, there was stairs to take you up to the car park from the Broadway. That's Hale Lane. So hence why further back that way was called Mill Hill the Hale. So now we get to see all these bridges were put in the late 60s, and there's some very good pictures on the Memories of Hendon website. Memories are in Brent Street, Hendon. And there are a series of pictures show all the reconstruction, because there was simply just one railway bridge carrying the Midland line, and they had to change it completely because the M1 had to go through, as well as new rail bridges heads. So yeah, and as part of that we end up with this, probably one of the least favourite stations in this area. And also a least favourite bus station, because they put the bus station underneath the M1. That's the M1 there, on a rather dainty, curvy bridge with these big posts holding it up. And as I said, Mill Hill Broadway station entrance is there in the corner, and then we have the bus station. So the build-up of fumes, quite bad, but obviously as we move to more electric buses, that won't be seen as a problem. And then also, just as a bit of minor interest, this M&S food hall was originally built in the mid-1970s as a Budgeons, and it was opened by Terry Wogan in 1973. And again, there are some fantastic pictures of Terry in there on the opening day with a load of women who are doing their shopping, opening the place up. They're on the Memories of Hendon website as well. So if you put in Mempics, Jalbum, Jalbum, you'll find all these fantastic pictures. So that's, actually, shall I really go proper nerd out here, shall I? In an episode of Budgie, the ITV series starring Adam Faith, I think it's in the second series, you see him, he gets out of a car on the M1, and then we then see him coming down over there, crossing over the road and up to one of these shops where he's sort of intercepted by a policeman and then picked up in a car. Very, very nerdy that is, but I know that obviously you can find that footage somewhere. It was in the second series of Budgie. So thank you very much from Mill Hill, signing off.